struggling single mom saw her first love at an airport, not knowing he was now a millionaire CEO. 12 years ago, she said goodbye to the man she loved, believing their paths would never cross again. Today, standing in a crowded airport terminal with her daughter's hand in hers, Sarah Mitchell is just trying to make it through another day. She doesn't know that in 30 seconds, her entire world will shift. She doesn't know that the stranger walking toward her, the one in the expensive suit surrounded by assistants, is the boy who once promised her forever. She doesn't know he's been searching for her, and she definitely doesn't know he never stopped loving her. This is the story of two people, one chance encounter, and the little girl who believed in miracles when her mother had forgotten how. Sarah Mitchell's alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning, the same time it had gone off every day for the past 3 years. She didn't need it anymore. Her body had learned the rhythm of exhaustion, waking her minutes before the shrill beeping began. In the darkness of her small bedroom, she lay still for just a moment, gathering the strength to face another day. Through the thin walls of their two-bedroom apartment, she could hear the neighbor's television, already blaring the morning news. Sarah closed her eyes and took 3 deep breaths, a technique her therapist had taught her back when she could still afford therapy. 1 breath for gratitude, 1 breath for strength, 1 breath for Emma. Emma, her reason for everything. Sarah pushed herself out of bed and padded quietly to the kitchen. The apartment was modest, some might say cramped, but it was clean, and it was theirs. She'd made sure of that. After Marcus left, after he'd drained their savings account and disappeared with a woman he'd met at his office, Sarah had been left with a mountain of debt, a toddler, and a choice, collapse or climb. She chose to climb. Every single day she chose to climb. The coffee maker sputtered to life as Sarah pulled out bread for Emma's lunch. Peanut butter and jelly again. She tried to vary a turkey on Mondays, cheese on Wednesdays, but the budget was tight, stretched thinner than the worn linoleum beneath her feet. Her shift at Memorial Hospital didn't start until 7, but she needed this quiet time, these precious moments before Emma woke up, to prepare herself for the performance of being okay. Because Sarah Mitchell had become an expert actress. She performed okay when she smiled at Emma over breakfast. She performed okay when she counted out change for the electric bill. She performed okay when other mothers at school pickup talked about their weekend plans, while Sarah mentally calculated whether she could afford new shoes for Emma or if they could make it another month with cardboard inserts covering the holes. At 6:15, she heard the familiar creak of Emma's bedroom door. Sarah turned from the counter, her tired face transforming instantly into something brighter, warmer. "Good morning, sunshine," she said, opening her arms as Emma shuffled into the kitchen, her brown hair a wild tangle, her favorite stuffed rabbit Mr. Hops dangling from one hand. "Morning, Mama," Emma mumbled, burrowing into Sarah's embrace. At 8 years old, she was getting too big to be carried, but Sarah still lifted her onto her hip, breathing in the sweet scent of her daughter's shampoo, the inexpensive kind, from the drugstore that Sarah had learned to make last 3 weeks instead of 2. "Did you sleep well, baby?" Emma nodded against her shoulder. "I dreamed about Grandma's house. Remember the big tree in her backyard? I was swinging on it." Sarah's heart constricted. Her mother had passed away 2 years ago, leaving Sarah without her anchor, without the one person who had helped her believe she could do this single mother thing. The house had been sold to cover medical bills, another loss in a long line of losses. "That sounds like a beautiful dream," Sarah said softly, setting Emma down at their small kitchen table. "Grandma loved pushing you on that swing." "I miss her," Emma said simply with the uncomplicated honesty of children. "I miss her too, sweetheart. Every day." Sarah placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of Emma, the cheap kind, dressed up with a drizzle of honey and some sliced banana. "But you know what Grandma would say?" Emma smiled, reciting the familiar phrase along with her mother. "Today is a gift. That's why they call it the present." "That's right." Sarah kissed the top of Emma's head. "So let's make today a good one, okay?" The morning routine unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance. Emma ate her breakfast while Sarah packed her lunch. Sarah ate standing up a piece of toast, black coffee, while Emma brushed her teeth. They gathered backpacks and jackets, checked homework folders, and Sarah ran a brush through Emma's hair, taming it into 2 neat braids. At 7:15, they stepped out into the cool morning air. Sarah's car, a 15-year-old sedan with a questionable transmission, sat in its spot, and Sarah said a silent prayer, the same one she said every morning. Please start. Please just start. Please just start. The engine turned over on the second try. Small mercies. Sarah dropped Emma at Ridgemont Elementary, watching as her daughter ran toward the entrance where her best friend Lily was waiting. Emma turned back once, waving enthusiastically, and Sarah waved back, holding her smile until Emma disappeared through the doors. Then, and only then, did Sarah allow her shoulders to slump, allow the weight of everything to settle back onto her like a familiar, heavy coat. She drove to Memorial Hospital, parked in the employee lot, and sat in her car for 3 minutes, another small ritual. 3 minutes to be tired. 3 minutes to be afraid. 3 minutes to be afraid. 3 minutes to be human. Then she gathered her things, straightened her scrubs, and walked into the hospital, her smile back in place. "Morning, Sarah," called Janet from the nurse's station. "Morning. How was your weekend?" The performance continued. It always did. Her shift was brutal, 12 hours of monitoring patients, administering medications, dealing with doctors' orders and family members' questions. Sarah was good at her job. Excellent, even. She cared about her patients, remembered their names, held their hands when they were afraid. But by hour 10, her feet ached, her back screamed, and she'd forgotten to eat lunch. At 6:45, she clocked out, picked up Emma from the after-school program, and drove home through rush hour traffic. They stopped at the grocery store, where Sarah carefully selected only sale items using coupons she'd clipped the night before. Emma was good during these trips, never begging for treats, seeming to understand in that intuitive way children sometimes do that money was tight. At home, Sarah made dinner pasta with jarred sauce, a side of frozen vegetables. They ate together at the small table, Emma chattering about her day, about the story her teacher had read, about the art project they were doing. Sarah listened, asked questions, laughed in all the right places. After dinner, after homework, after bath time, Sarah tucked Emma into bed, reading 2 chapters from their current library book, a story about a girl who discovered she was a princess. Emma's eyes grew heavy, and Sarah smoothed her hair back, memorizing her daughter's face in the dim glow of the nightlight. "Mama?" Emma whispered, half asleep. "Yes, baby. Are we going to be okay?" The question pierced Sarah's heart. She'd tried so hard to shield Emma from their struggles, to make their life feel normal, safe. But children knew. They always knew. "We're going to be just fine," Sarah said firmly. "We have each other, and that makes us rich in all the ways that matter." Emma smiled, satisfied, and drifted off to sleep. Sarah stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her daughter breathe, fighting back tears. Then she went to the living room, pulled out the stack of bills on the coffee table, and began the nightly ritual of deciding which ones could wait another week and which ones absolutely couldn't. The electric bill, the car insurance, the credit card with the medical debt from Emma's ear infection last month. The numbers swam before her eyes. Tomorrow, she told herself, tomorrow she'd figure it out. Tomorrow something would change. But tonight she allowed herself to feel the weight of it all, to acknowledge that she was tired, so tired of climbing. 3 days later, Sarah found herself in an unlikely place, the airport. Her younger sister, Rachel, was flying in from Denver for a surprise visit, or rather, what Rachel claimed was a surprise visit, though Sarah suspected it had more to do with Rachel's concern about her. They'd spoken on the phone the previous week, and Sarah had made the mistake of mentioning how tired she was. Rachel, ever the fixer, had apparently decided that Sarah needed support. Sarah appreciated it, even if she'd never asked for it. It was a rare Saturday off, and Emma was thrilled about the adventure. She held Sarah's hand as they walked through the bright terminal, her eyes wide with wonder at the planes visible through the enormous windows. "Mama, look how big that one is." Emma pressed her face against the glass. "That's going to China," Sarah said, reading the departure board. "Can you imagine flying all the way across the ocean? I want to go on a plane someday," Emma said wistfully. "You will," Sarah promised, though she had no idea how she'd ever afford it. "When you're older, you'll go lots of places." They made their way to the arrivals area, checking the board for Rachel's flight information. On time. 20 minutes until landing. "Can we get a snack?" Emma asked, eyeing a cafe. Sarah glanced at the prices posted behind the counter and winced. Airport markup was cruel. How about we wait until Aunt Rachel gets here and we'll all get something together? Emma nodded agreeably, and they found seats near the arrivals gate. Sarah pulled out a book she'd been trying to finish for 3 months. Reading time was a luxury she rarely had, while Emma colored in a book she'd brought from home. The terminal buzzed with activity, families reuniting with tears and embraces, business travelers striding purposefully toward their gates, announcements echoing overhead about boarding times and security protocols. Sarah tried to focus on her book, but her mind wandered. She needed to talk to Rachel about Mom's estate. There were still a few items in storage that needed to be divided. She needed to ask about Rachel's job, her life in Denver, anything to avoid talking too much about her own struggles. Rachel meant well, but Sarah hated feeling like a charity case, even with family. "Mama, that man has a robot suitcase," Emma exclaimed, pointing at a traveler whose luggage was following him automatically. Sarah looked up and smiled. "That's pretty fancy, isn't it? When I grow up, I'm going to have a robot that does my homework," Emma declared. "Nice try, kiddo. That's not what robots are for." They laughed together, and Sarah felt a moment of pure contentment. These simple moments, just her and Emma experiencing something new together, these were the moments that made everything worthwhile. Then, across the terminal, Sarah saw him. At first, it was just a feeling, that strange sixth sense that tells you someone is looking at you. She glanced up casually, scanning the crowd, and her eyes landed on a man about 30 feet away. The world tilted. He was older, of course, they both were. 12 years had passed since college, since those golden days when life had felt full of infinite possibility, but she would have recognized those eyes anywhere. Dark, intense, framed by lashes that had always seemed unfairly long. His hair was shorter now, professionally styled. He wore a suit that even Sarah's untrained eye could recognize as expensive. But it was him, Daniel Chen, her first love, her first heartbreak, the man she planned a future with before reality had crashed down around them. Their eyes met across the crowded terminal, and Sarah watched recognition dawn on his face. He'd been walking with purpose, flanked by 2 people in professional attire, assistants maybe, but he stopped abruptly. One of the assistants bumped into him, apologizing, but Daniel didn't seem to notice. He was staring at her. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. 1,000 memories flooded back, late-night study sessions that turned into conversations about dreams and fears, his hand in hers as they walked across campus. The way he'd looked at her, like she was the most important person in the world. The plan they'd made: graduate, get married, build a life together. And then his parents' ultimatum. The family business, the expectations, the choice he'd had to make between the life his family demanded and the life he wanted with her. He'd chosen his family. Sarah had understood. How could she ask him to give up everything? But understanding hadn't made it hurt less. She hadn't seen him or heard from him since graduation day 12 years ago. And now here he was, in an airport terminal, looking at her like she was a ghost. "Mama?" Emma tugged on her sleeve. "Are you okay? You look funny." Sarah blinked, tearing her eyes away from Daniel. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I thought I saw someone I used to know." When she looked back, Daniel was moving toward her, navigating through the crowd. His assistants followed, looking confused. Sarah's mind raced. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. She wanted to look away. She wanted to drink in the sight of him. She was acutely aware of her appearance, her old jeans, her Target clearance rack sweater, her hair thrown up in a messy ponytail. She hadn't worn makeup. She looked exactly like what she was, a tired, overworked single mother barely keeping her head above water, and he looked like success incarnate. "Sarah?" His voice was deeper than she remembered, but it still sent a shiver through her. He stopped a few feet away as if unsure whether to come closer. "Sarah Mitchell. I can't believe. Is it really you?" She stood up slowly, hyper-aware of Emma watching this interaction with curious eyes. "Hello, Daniel. It's been a long time." 12 years of absence stretched between them like an ocean. His eyes were scanning her face, searching for something. You look exactly the same." That was a lie, and they both knew it, but Sarah appreciated it anyway. "You look well," she said, and that wasn't a lie. He looked incredible. An awkward silence fell. One of his assistants cleared her throat gently. Mr. Chen, your car is waiting outside. We need to get to the office for the 2 o'clock meeting. Mr. Chen. So he'd taken his place in the family business after all. Give me a minute, Daniel said, not taking his eyes off Sarah. The assistants exchanged glances but stepped back, giving them space. I didn't know you were in the city, Daniel said. I thought you were going to pursue journalism in New York. Another life. Another version of herself. Plans change, Sarah said simply. I'm working at Memorial Hospital now. I'm a nurse. A nurse. He smiled. You always wanted to help people. That makes sense. And you? Sarah asked, though she could already guess. You're working with your family? I run the company now, he said, and there was something in his voice, pride mixed with something else. Resignation, maybe. Chen Technologies. We've expanded significantly since college. We're one of the top tech firms on the West Coast. That's wonderful, Daniel. I'm happy for you. Another silence. This one heavier. Emma tugged on Sarah's hand again. Mama, is this your friend? Both Sarah and Daniel looked down at Emma as if they'd forgotten the rest of the world existed. Sarah hesitated. Yes, sweetheart. This is someone I knew a long time ago. Daniel, this is my daughter, Emma. Something shifted in Daniel's expression as he looked at Emma. Surprise, certainly, but also something softer. He crouched down to Emma's level, his expensive suit creasing without apparent concern. Hello, Emma. It's very nice to meet you. You have your mother's eyes. Emma beamed. Thank you. You have a very nice suit. Are you a prince? Daniel laughed a real laugh that made him look years younger, more like the boy Sarah had once known. Not quite, but thank you for thinking so. He stood back up, and his eyes met Sarah's again. There were questions there, ones he was too polite to ask. Is there a husband? Is there a father in the picture? How did you end up here, Mr. Chen? The assistant said again, more urgently. I'm sorry, but we really do need to go. Right. Yes. Daniel seemed to shake himself out of a trance. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, holding it out to Sarah. This has my direct line. It was so good to see you, Sarah. I'd love to catch up properly if you have time. Maybe we could get coffee? Sarah took the card, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. Maybe, she said non-committally. Please, Daniel said, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. Please call. There's so much I'd like to say to you. Before Sarah could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it, grimaced, and looked back at her apologetically. I have to take this. Please, Sarah, call me. And then he was walking away, phone to his ear, assistants in tow, disappearing into the crowd like a dream she might have imagined. Sarah stood there, his business card in her hand, her heart pounding. Was he your boyfriend? Emma asked innocently. A long time ago, Sarah admitted. He seemed nice and really fancy. Yes, Sarah whispered, watching the place where he'd vanished. He always was. 5 minutes later, Rachel appeared, wheeling her suitcase and waving enthusiastically. She wrapped Sarah in a tight hug, then scooped Emma up and spun her around. Aunt Rachel! Emma squealed with delight. Hey, kiddo! I missed you so much. As they walked toward the exit, Rachel chattering about her flight and her plans for the visit, Sarah's hand closed around the business card in her pocket. Some part of her life from 12 years ago had just walked back into her present, and she had no idea what to do about it. That night, after Rachel had fallen asleep in Emma's room, the two of them crowded into Emma's twin bed like conspirators. Sarah sat alone in the living room, Daniel's business card on the coffee table in front of her. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. Sarah had made herself a cup of tea she didn't really want, just to have something to do with her hands. She picked up the card, ran her thumb over the embossed lettering. Chen Technologies, Daniel Chen, Chief Executive Officer. The address was downtown, in one of those gleaming high-rises Sarah had only ever seen from a distance. A different world, a world she'd once thought she might be part of. The memories came whether she wanted them or not. She'd met Daniel in her sophomore year of college, in a philosophy class neither of them had particularly wanted to take. She'd been running late, had grabbed the first available seat, and found herself sitting next to a serious-looking young man with wire-rimmed glasses and a notebook already open. filled with meticulous notes. "You might want to write this down," he'd whispered when the professor began discussing Plato's cave. "She tests heavily on the metaphors." Sarah had liked him immediately. Over the following weeks, study sessions had turned into coffee dates, which had turned into long walks around campus, which had turned into Sarah falling hopelessly, completely in love. Daniel had been different from anyone she'd ever known. He was thoughtful, kind, driven. He talked about wanting to make a difference in the world, about using technology to solve real problems. His family was wealthy, she'd known that, though he never flaunted it, and they expected him to take over the family business eventually. But Daniel had dreams of his own. They'd talked about everything, their childhoods, their fears, their hopes. Sarah had told him about her modest upbringing, her single mother who had worked 2 jobs to put Sarah through school. Daniel had told her about the pressure of being the only son, of carrying generations of expectations on his shoulders. "Sometimes I feel like my life has already been written," he'd said one night, lying on a blanket in the campus quad, staring up at the stars, "like I'm just following a script someone else wrote." "Then write your own script," Sarah had said simply. "It's your life, Daniel." He'd turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes had taken her breath away. "You make me believe I could." They'd been together for 2 years, 2 years of imagining a future where they both pursue their dreams, where love would be enough to overcome any obstacle. They'd been young and naive and hopelessly idealistic. The end had come during their senior year. Daniel's father had summoned him home for a weekend, and he'd returned to campus changed, quieter, troubled. "My father is retiring," he told Sarah, his voice hollow. "Earlier than planned. He's sick, nothing terminal, but serious enough that he can't run the company anymore. My uncle could take over temporarily, but the family has decided they want me to step in immediately after graduation." Sarah had felt the ground shift beneath her. "What about graduate school? What about your plans?" "I don't think I have a choice, Sarah. There's always a choice." He'd looked at her with such sadness. "Not for me. Not really. This is my responsibility, my duty. The company employs thousands of people. My family has built this over 3 generations. I can't just walk away because I want to study environmental technology instead." They'd argued, not loudly. They never fought loudly, but with quiet intensity. Sarah had tried to understand, had tried to be supportive, but inside, she was screaming. "What about us?" she'd finally asked. "What about our plans? Come with me," Daniel had said suddenly, desperately. "Move back to the city with me. We can still be together. You could find work there, and we could." "Daniel, I have a full scholarship to Columbia's journalism program. I'd be giving up my dream." "And I'm giving up mine," he'd said softly. The unfairness of it had made Sarah want to cry. Why did one of them have to sacrifice? Why couldn't they both have what they wanted? But life, Sarah had learned, didn't work that way. In the end, they'd both chosen their separate paths. Daniel had gone back to his family's company. Sarah had gone to New York, determined to build the life she'd imagined. Except New York had been harder than she'd expected. Journalism jobs were scarce and low-paying. She'd struggled to make rent, had taken a waitressing job to survive, and then she'd met Marcus. Marcus, who had seemed stable and kind. Marcus, who had promised her security. Marcus, who had proposed after 6 months of dating, offering her a life that felt safer than the struggle she'd been enduring. Sarah had said yes. She'd been 23 and tired and maybe a little heartbroken, and Marcus had seemed like a good choice, a practical choice. She'd quit journalism school, had moved back to her home city where Marcus had a job opportunity. They'd gotten married quickly. Emma had come a year later, and for a while, Sarah had convinced herself she was happy. But Marcus had turned out to be something other than what he'd seemed. Controlling, emotionally distant, and eventually unfaithful. When Emma was 5, Sarah had come home early from a shift. She'd become a nurse by then, needing a practical career to support them, and found evidence of Marcus's affair. The confrontation had been ugly. He left that night, and in the following weeks, Sarah had discovered he'd been hiding debt, making terrible financial decisions, and had emptied their savings before disappearing. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago. Sarah hadn't heard from Marcus since. He sent no child support, made no attempt to see Emma. He'd simply vanished, leaving Sarah to pick up the pieces. Now, sitting in her small living room, Sarah wondered what her life might have looked like if she'd made different choices. If she'd gone with Daniel 12 years ago. If she'd never met Marcus. If she'd fought harder for her dreams instead of settling for security that had turned out to be an illusion. But then there would be no Emma. And Emma was everything. Sarah picked up her phone, looking at Daniel's number on the card. Her finger hovered over the screen. What would she even say to him? What did they have to talk about after all these years? And yet the way he'd looked at her in the airport, there had been something there. Something that felt unfinished. Still up? Rachel's voice made Sarah jump. Her sister padded into the living room in borrowed pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. Emma kicked me. That kid sleeps like a starfish. Sarah smiled. She gets that from me, apparently. Sorry. Rachel plopped down on the couch beside her, noticed the business card. What's that? Sarah hesitated, then handed it to her sister. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. Chen Technologies. This is a major company. How do you know? She stopped, her eyes widening. Wait, Chen. Daniel Chen, as in your college boyfriend Daniel? We ran into each other at the airport. Total coincidence. Holy crap, Sarah. He's like mega successful now. I read an article about him in Forbes last year. He's some kind of tech genius philanthropist. Youngest CEO of a Fortune 500 company or something. Sarah nodded. So I gathered. Rachel studied her sister's face. And he gave you his card. He wants to catch up, get coffee. Are you going to call him? I don't know, Sarah admitted. What's the point? Our lives are completely different now. He probably just wants to assuage some guilt or curiosity. Maybe compare notes on how things turned out. Or maybe he wants to see you because he never stopped caring about you. Rachel suggested gently. Sarah laughed, but it came out bitter. Rachel, look at me. Look at my life. I'm a broke single mother living paycheck to paycheck. He's a millionaire CEO. We don't exactly run in the same circles anymore. So what? Money doesn't determine worth, Sarah. You know that. I know that. But it does determine reality. What would we even talk about? His yacht? My credit card debt? Rachel was quiet for a moment, then said, You know, maybe you should go. Not because he's successful, or because there might be some fairy tale ending, but because you never got closure. You loved him, Sarah. Really loved him. And then you both just went different directions without ever really saying goodbye. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I don't have room in my life for complicated right now, Rach. I have Emma to think about. I have bills to pay. I can't afford to get distracted by what-ifs and might-have-beens. One cup of coffee isn't going to derail your life, Rachel said softly. And you deserve to have something for yourself. Something that isn't about being Emma's mom or being a nurse or being the person who keeps everything together. You deserve to be Sarah for an hour. The words hit harder than Sarah had expected. When was the last time she'd done something just for herself? When was the last time she'd thought about what she wanted, separate from her responsibilities? I'll think about it, Sarah said finally. Rachel squeezed her hand. That's all I'm asking. They sat together in comfortable silence, sisters who had always understood each other, even when their lives had taken very different paths. Finally, Rachel yawned. I'm going back to bed before Emma takes over the whole mattress. But Sarah, whatever you decide about Daniel, I'm proud of you. You're doing an incredible job with Emma. You're an amazing mom. Don't forget that. After Rachel left, Sarah sat for a while longer, turning the business card over and over in her hands. Finally, she placed it on the refrigerator, held there by a magnet Emma had made in art class. A lopsided heart with, I love you, Mama, written in crayon. She would think about it. That's all she could promise herself right now. But as she turned off the lights and headed to bed, Sarah couldn't shake the image of Daniel's face when he'd seen her, the way his whole expression had softened, the almost desperate way he'd asked her to call. 12 years was a long time to be apart. But some connections, Sarah was beginning to realize, didn't care about time at all. Sarah stared at the message on her phone for the 4th time that morning. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., there's a quiet cafe near the hospital. Daniel. She'd finally texted him 3 days after the airport encounter. A simple, "Hi, it's Sarah," that had felt like jumping off a cliff. He'd responded within minutes, and they'd arranged to meet on her day off. Now that day had arrived, and Sarah was second-guessing everything. "You're being ridiculous," Rachel had told her that morning before driving back to Denver. "It's just coffee. You're allowed to have coffee with an old friend." But Daniel wasn't just an old friend. He was the man who had made her believe in soulmates. The man whose loss she'd mourned for years. The man who represented everything her life might have been. Sarah changed her outfit 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a simple blue sweater that Rachel had insisted she borrow. "It brings out your eyes," Rachel had said firmly, "and it's nicer than anything in your closet. Don't argue." Emma was at school, which was a relief. Sarah didn't want to have to explain this to her daughter, didn't want to answer questions she wasn't sure she could answer herself. The cafe Daniel had suggested was called Serenity, one of those upscale places with exposed brick, local art on the walls, and coffee that cost more than Sarah typically spent on lunch. She arrived 5 minutes early, ordered a regular coffee to avoid seeming like she was waiting for him, and chose a table near the window. Her hands were shaking slightly. She wrapped them around the warm cup, taking deep breaths. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door chimed and Daniel walked in. He was dressed more casually than he'd been at the airport, dark jeans, a crisp white button-down, a charcoal blazer. But he still radiated success, confidence, the unmistakable air of someone who belonged in rooms Sarah would never enter. When his eyes found hers, his whole face lit up. He crossed the cafe in quick strides. "Sarah, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." She stood awkwardly, and he surprised her by pulling her into a brief hug. He smelled expensive, some cologne she didn't recognize, nothing like the drugstore body spray he'd worn in college. They sat, and for a moment, neither spoke. The weight of 12 years sat between them like an invisible wall. "You look beautiful," Daniel said finally. Sarah laughed nervously. "You don't have to do that." "Do what?" "Pretend. I know what I look like, Daniel. I'm tired and broke, and I probably have permanent dark circles at this point." His expression softened. "I mean it, Sarah. You look exactly like I remembered. Maybe a little tired, but still beautiful. Still, you." The sincerity in his voice made Sarah's throat tight. She took a sip of coffee to buy herself time. "So," she said, deflecting, "CEO of a Fortune 500 company. That's quite an achievement." Daniel grimaced slightly. "It sounds more impressive than it feels most days. It's a lot of meetings and corporate politics and trying to keep stockholders happy while also trying to do something meaningful with the technology we're developing." "Are you doing something meaningful?" He considered the question seriously. "We're trying. We've invested heavily in sustainable technology, solar innovations, water purification systems for developing countries. It's not the environmental work I dreamed of doing, but it's something. It has to be something, or I'm not sure I could live with the choices I made." The last sentence hung in the air between them. "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked quietly. "Taking over the company?" "Every day," Daniel admitted. "And not at all. I hate that I gave up what I wanted, but the company has allowed me to help thousands of people. We've created jobs, funded research, made actual changes in the world. So no, I don't regret that. But I regret—" He stopped, looked directly at her. "I regret losing you, Sarah. I regret that every single day." Sarah's breath caught. "Daniel, I know it's been 12 years. I know we've both lived entire lives since then, but I need you to know that walking away from you was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I thought about you constantly, wondered where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy." "I got married," Sarah said, needing him to know, to understand. "His name was Marcus. We have a daughter, Emma, the little girl you met." "And Marcus?" Daniel asked carefully. "Left 3 years ago. Cleaned out our savings and disappeared with another woman. I haven't heard from him since." Something dark flickered across Daniel's face. "I'm sorry, Sarah. You deserve so much better than that." "Yeah, well, my judgment wasn't exactly stellar. I was young and stupid, and I thought stability was the same thing as love." "You weren't stupid. You were trying to survive in an impossible city with impossible dreams. I understand that." "Do you?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like everything worked out pretty well for you. The company, the success, the Forbes articles. Daniel leaned back, and Sarah saw something in his face: exhaustion, loneliness, something hollow. I'm 42 years old, Sarah. I work 80-hour weeks. I live in a penthouse apartment that I'm rarely in. I date occasionally. Women my mother approves of who want to be the wife of a CEO, not the partner of Daniel. I have acquaintances and business associates, but I can count my real friends on one hand. My life looks impressive from the outside, but most days I feel like I'm playing a part in someone else's story. He paused, looking down at his untouched coffee. 3 months ago, I was in a board meeting. We were discussing quarterly profits and expansion strategies, and I had this moment of complete clarity. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just because it made me happy, the last time I'd laughed genuinely, the last time I'd felt like myself instead of the person everyone expects me to be. He looked up at her, and Sarah saw the boy she'd loved in those eyes. And then I saw you at the airport, and it was like someone had turned the lights back on. Suddenly I remembered what it felt like to want something for myself, to connect with someone who knew me before I became this. He gestured at himself, at his expensive clothes and polished appearance. Sarah didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to comfort him, to tell him she understood, but another part, the part that had been struggling alone for 3 years, that counted pennies and worked double shifts and cried in her car when Emma couldn't see that part, felt a flash of anger. "You're lonely in a penthouse," she said quietly. "I'm lonely in a 2-bedroom apartment where I can't afford to turn the heat up past 65. We're not the same, Daniel." He flinched. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to compare our struggles or say my problems are equivalent to yours. I'm just trying to be honest about where I am." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know that seeing you again felt like finding something I'd lost. Like maybe there's a chance to have something real in my life again." "I have a daughter," Sarah said firmly. "A daughter who is my entire world. I don't have room in my life for complicated, Daniel. I barely have room for simple." "I know, and I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to see you, talk to you, remember what it felt like to be around someone who knew me when I was still figuring out who I wanted to be." They sat in silence for a while. Through the window, Sarah watched people pass by on the street, living their lives, carrying their own burdens and joys. "Tell me about Emma," Daniel said eventually. "What's she like?" Sarah's face softened immediately, the way it always did when she talked about her daughter. "She's incredible, smart, kind, curious about everything. She wants to be a veterinarian and an astronaut and a teacher, sometimes all at once. She reads above her grade level. She's patient with other kids who are struggling. She makes me laugh every single day. She sounds amazing, like her mother." "She's better than me," Sarah said honestly. "She's untouched by cynicism. She still believes in magic and fairness and happy endings. I want to protect that as long as I can." "I can see why you're so protective of your life," Daniel said quietly. "She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the only good thing that came out of my marriage." Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, grimaced. "My assistant. I'm supposed to be in a meeting in 30 minutes. "You should go," Sarah said, surprising herself by feeling disappointed. "I don't want to." But he was already standing, pulling bills from his wallet and leaving them on the table, far more than necessary. "Can we do this again? I know you're busy, and I know this is complicated, but—" "I don't know," Sarah interrupted. "I need to think about what this is, Daniel. What it could be, what I want it to be." "That's fair." He hesitated, then said, "There's a fundraiser next Friday for the Children's Hospital. My company sponsors it every year. Would you come as my guest?" Sarah almost laughed. "Daniel, I can't go to a fundraiser. I don't have anything to wear to something like that, and I can't afford a babysitter for—" "Please," he said, "let me take care of the details. You're a nurse at Memorial, right? This is exactly the kind of thing you should be at. It's raising money for pediatric care. And I'd really like you to be there, not as Anything specific? Just as someone I care about. Sarah wanted to say no. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was a bad idea, but something in his eyes, the hope, the vulnerability, made her pause. "I'll think about it," she said. It was the best she could offer. Daniel smiled, and for a moment he looked young again. "That's all I'm asking. I'll text you the details." "And Sarah?" "Yes? Thank you for coming today, for giving me this chance to explain, for not slamming the door completely." After he left, Sarah sat for a long time, staring at the money he'd left, thinking about the parallel universes they'd each been living in. She thought about Emma, about her responsibilities, about the careful life she'd built from the ruins of her marriage, and she thought about the way her heart had leaped when Daniel walked through the door, the way it still felt like coming home, talking to him. Some doors, once opened, were impossible to close again. Sarah just wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. The dress arrived 3 days before the fundraiser. Sarah had been preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. Emma ran to answer it and came back carrying an enormous white box with a silk ribbon. "Mama, someone sent you a present." Sarah's heart sank even as Emma's eyes lit up. She knew exactly who it was from. Inside was the most beautiful dress Sarah had ever seen. A deep sapphire blue, elegant but not too formal, with a note in Daniel's handwriting. "Just in case you were still looking for a reason to say no, please say yes, D. It's like a princess dress." Emma breathed, touching the fabric reverently. Sarah wanted to send it back, wanted to call Daniel and tell him this was too much, that she couldn't accept something like this. But Rachel's voice echoed in her head, "You deserve to have something for yourself." And Emma was looking at her with such wonder, such excitement at the thought of her mother going to something special, so Sarah had said yes. Now, standing in the lobby of the Grand Riverside Hotel, Sarah felt completely out of place. The dress fit perfectly. Daniel had somehow guessed her size, and Rachel had come back for the weekend, specifically to help with hair and makeup and to watch Emma. "You look like a movie star," Rachel had said, tears in her eyes. But surrounded by women in designer gowns and men in tuxedos, Sarah felt like an imposter. She clutched her simple clutch purse borrowed from Rachel and tried not to look as terrified as she felt. "Sarah." She turned and found Daniel striding toward her, and her breath caught. He was devastating in a tuxedo, commanding attention without even trying. But when he reached her, his eyes held only warmth. "You came," he said softly. "I almost didn't. I'm glad you did." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The ballroom was spectacular chandeliers, live music, tables decorated with elaborate floral arrangements. There were easily 300 people here, all of them wealthy, influential, important. Daniel introduced her to people whose names she recognized from news articles, CEOs, politicians, philanthropists, and to each one, he introduced her the same way. "This is Sarah Mitchell, a nurse at Memorial Hospital," not as his date, not as anything more, just as herself. Sarah found herself relaxing slightly. The people here were surprisingly normal once you got past the designer clothes and expensive jewelry. They asked her about her work, seemed genuinely interested in her perspective on healthcare. And Daniel never left her side. He was attentive without being possessive, included her in conversations without putting her on the spot, and periodically whispered context about people or inside jokes that made her smile. "You're good at this," she told him during a quiet moment. "At what?" "Making people feel comfortable, important, like they matter." "You do matter," he said seriously. "You matter more than most of the people in this room." Before Sarah could respond, the program began. There were speeches about the Children's Hospital, presentations about the impact of donations, a video that showed children whose lives had been saved or improved by the care they'd received. Sarah found herself tearing up, thinking about the families she'd worked with, the children she'd cared for. This was why she'd become a nurse, to help people in their most vulnerable moments. "You okay?" Daniel whispered. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The fundraiser portion began a silent auction for various items and experiences. Sarah looked at the amounts people were bidding and felt dizzy. A weekend at someone's vacation home, $15,000. A private dinner prepared by a celebrity chef, $8,000. A signed guitar from a famous musician, $20,000. These were amounts she couldn't even fathom spending on luxuries when she counted quarters for laundry. Then the live auction began. The auctioneer was entertaining, spinning stories about each item to drive up bids. A painting by a local artist, a golf package at an exclusive resort, a chance to throw the opening pitch at a baseball game. And then, next we have a very special item, a 2-week medical mission trip to Guatemala, where volunteers will work alongside doctors and nurses to provide health care in underserved communities. The trip includes all accommodations, supplies, and support. This is a chance to make a real difference while experiencing another culture. Sarah felt her heart squeeze. This was exactly the kind of thing she'd dreamed of doing, using her skills to help people who desperately needed it. But it was also exactly the kind of thing she could never afford. The bidding started at $5,000 and quickly climbed. Sarah watched, simultaneously inspired and heartbroken. At $12,000, the bidding seemed to slow. "Do I hear $13,000? The auctioneer called. There was a pause. Then Daniel raised his paddle. Sarah's head whipped around to look at him. "Daniel, what are you?" "13,000 to number 47, the auctioneer announced. "Do I hear 14? Another paddle went up across the room. "14,000. "Do I hear 15? Daniel raised his paddle again without hesitation. "Daniel, stop!" Sarah whispered urgently. "This is too much." He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "When's the last time you did something just for you, Sarah? Something that had nothing to do with Emma or bills or responsibilities. I can't let you." 15,000 to number 47. Going once. Another bid from across the room. 16,000. Daniel raised his paddle. 20,000. The room went quiet. People turned to look. The auctioneer grinned. 20,000 from number 47. "That's quite a commitment to our cause. Do I hear 21? Silence. Going once. Going twice. Sold to number 47 for $20,000. The room erupted in applause. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. "Daniel, I can't accept this. This is insane. Do you understand how much money that is? It's a tax-deductible donation to a cause I believe in," he said calmly. "And it's a gift to someone who deserves a chance to use her incredible skills to help people who need her. I have a daughter. I can't just leave for 2 weeks. It's not until next summer. You have months to plan, to arrange care for Emma, to make it work." "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking slightly. Daniel took her hand, right there in the middle of the ballroom with hundreds of people around them. "Because 12 years ago, I chose duty over dreams, over you, and I've regretted it ever since. I can't give you back those years, Sarah. I can't undo the choices we both made. But I can give you this. I can give you a chance to do something you've always wanted to do." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, and she didn't care. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People congratulated her, told her how wonderful the mission trip would be, how lucky she was. Sarah smiled and thanked them, but her mind was reeling. When the fundraiser ended, Daniel offered to drive her home. They sat in his car, a sleek BMW that probably cost more than Sarah had earned in 5 years, and silence stretched between them. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," Daniel said finally. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "I don't know how to feel," Sarah admitted. "Part of me is excited beyond words. Part of me feels like I'm taking advantage of you. Part of me is terrified about what this means." "It doesn't have to mean anything you don't want it to mean," Daniel said gently. "It's just a gift, no strings attached. Daniel, nothing is ever just anything. You bid $20,000 on a mission trip for me. That's not nothing." He was quiet for a moment. "You're right. It's not nothing. It's me trying to do something good for someone who deserves good things. It's me trying to be part of something that matters. It's me hoping that maybe we can find a way to be in each other's lives again." "As what?" Sarah asked. "What are we, Daniel? Old friends? Something more? Because I need to be clear about that. for Emma's sake, if nothing else. I don't know, he said honestly. I just know that I've been more myself in the few hours I've spent with you this week than I've been in years. I know that talking to you feels like breathing. I know that when I think about my future, I want you in it somehow. I'm a single mother with a mountain of debt and a life that's held together with duct tape and determination, Sarah said. You're a millionaire CEO with responsibilities I can't even comprehend. Our worlds don't fit together, Daniel. Maybe they don't have to fit perfectly, he suggested. Maybe they just have to intersect in the right ways. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, at the man he'd become and the boy she'd loved still visible in his eyes. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared of getting hurt again. I'm scared of Emma getting attached to you and then you deciding this isn't what you want. I'm scared that you're going to wake up one day and realize that nostalgia isn't the same as love. I'm scared too, Daniel admitted. I'm scared of messing this up. I'm scared that I don't know how to be what you need. I'm scared that 12 years is too long to bridge. They looked at each other in the dim light of the car, two people carrying years of baggage and hope in equal measure. But I think we owe it to ourselves to try, Daniel said. Don't you? Sarah thought about Emma's question weeks ago. Are we going to be okay? She thought about her mother's favorite saying, today is a gift. She thought about the fact that life had somehow brought her and Daniel back together, against all odds. Okay, she said softly. We can try. Slowly, carefully, with Emma's well-being as the priority. Daniel's face broke into a genuine smile. Slowly and carefully. I can do that. He drove her home, walked her to her door like a gentleman, and left with just a gentle squeeze of her hand. Inside, Rachel was asleep on the couch, and Emma was safe in her bed, Mr. Hops tucked under her arm. Sarah stood in her daughter's doorway for a long time, watching her sleep, making silent promises about protecting her heart, about making good choices, about not letting hope blind her to reality. But for the first time in years, Sarah let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, good things could happen to ordinary people. Maybe second chances were real. Maybe it was okay to hope. 3 months later, Sarah's life had changed in ways she was still struggling to fully comprehend. It started slowly, just as they promised each other. Daniel began showing up at the hospital cafeteria on her lunch breaks, bringing coffee and conversation. They talked about everything, their work, their hopes, their fears, and slowly, carefully, Daniel began spending time with Emma. The first time had been at a park. Emma had been cautious at first, the strange man from the airport who kept appearing in her mother's life. But Daniel had come prepared with a kite, a beautiful, colorful butterfly kite, and had spent an hour teaching Emma how to fly it. Sarah had watched from a bench, her heart in her throat, as her daughter's laughter rang out across the park. He's nice, Mama, Emma had said later. He doesn't try too hard like some of your friends. He just talks to me like a person. That had been the beginning. Now, on this Sunday afternoon, they were at Daniel's apartment, the penthouse Sarah had heard about but never seen. Emma was in the guest room, video calling with Rachel and showing off Daniel's collection of vintage science fiction books that he'd given her permission to explore. Sarah stood on the balcony, looking out over the city, still trying to reconcile this view with her own small apartment. It's too much, isn't it? Daniel said, coming up beside her with 2 glasses of wine. It's different, Sarah said diplomatically. I hate it here most of the time, he admitted. It's beautiful, but it's empty. It's always felt empty. Sarah turned to look at him. Daniel, we need to talk about something. His expression became cautious. Okay, this thing we're doing, seeing each other, spending time together. Emma's getting attached, I'm getting attached, and I need to know what we're building toward before anyone gets hurt. Daniel set down the wine glasses and took both her hands. I love you, Sarah. I never stopped, and I know that sounds dramatic or premature, but it's the truth. These past 3 months have been the best I've had in 12 years. You and Emma, you brought life back into my world. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I think I never stopped either. Not really. But love isn't always enough, Daniel. We learned that 12 years ago. You're right, he said. But we're not the same people we were 12 years ago. I'm not choosing between you and duty this time. I'm choosing to build a life that includes both. And yes, that means changes. Big ones. What kind of changes? Daniel took a deep breath. I've been working with the board for the past month. I'm stepping down as CEO. Sarah's jaw dropped. What? Daniel, no. I can't let you give up your company for, I'm not giving it up. He interrupted gently. I'm restructuring my role. My CFO, Margaret, is brilliant and has been wanting more responsibility for years. She'll become CEO. I'll remain as chairman of the board and head of our sustainability division, the work I actually care about. It means fewer hours, more control over my schedule, and the ability to actually have a life outside of boardrooms. Your family will adjust. My mother is already thrilled at the prospect of me having more time for personal life, especially when I told her about you and Emma. Sarah blinked. You told your mother about us. I told my whole family. I showed them pictures. My mother wants to meet Emma. She's already planning a family dinner and has opinions about whether we should have the ceremony in spring or fall. Ceremony? Sarah's voice came out as a squeak. Daniel dropped to one knee, and Sarah's heart stopped. I'm doing this completely backwards, he said, smiling up at her. I should have more time to wine and dine you. To do this romantically with candles and music and a perfect speech. But Sarah, I've already wasted 12 years. I don't want to waste another moment. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning but tasteful diamond ring. I'm not asking you to marry me right now, he said quickly, seeing her panicked expression. I'm asking if you'll consider it, if you'll let me court you properly. Let me prove that I can be a good partner to you and a good influence in Emma's life. Let me show you that we can build something real together. Daniel, this is insane. We've only been dating for 3 months. We've known each other for 12 years. We've loved each other for 12 years. The dating is just catching up with what's always been true. Sarah looked down at this man, this brilliant, successful, complicated man who had once broken her heart and was now offering to spend his life healing it. I have conditions, she said shakily. Name them. Emma comes first. Always. Any decision we make, we consider her. Absolutely. I keep working. I'm not giving up my independence or my career. I wouldn't ask you to. We go to couples counseling. If we're really doing this, we do it right. Already made an appointment with the best therapist I could find. Sarah laughed, crying now. You're serious about this? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She pulled him to his feet, looking into those eyes she loved for so long. Then yes. Yes, I'll consider it. Yes, I'll let you court me. Yes to building something together. Daniel kissed her then, soft and sweet, and full of promise. When they pulled apart, they were both crying. Can I tell Emma, he asked, that I'd like to be part of her life? Permanently? We tell her together, Sarah said. And we do it slowly. We let her set the pace. They went inside, where Emma was curled up in an armchair, absorbed in a book. She looked up when they entered, taking in their tear-stained faces with worry. What's wrong? She asked, setting the book aside. Sarah and Daniel sat on either side of her. Sarah took her daughter's hand. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Everything is actually really right, but we wanted to talk to you about something important. Emma looked between them, her expression serious. Are you getting married? Sarah blinked. How did you? I'm 8, not dumb, Emma said matter-of-factly. You look at each other like people do in movies before they get married. So are you. Daniel laughed. Maybe someday, if you'd be okay with that. But right now, we wanted to ask how you'd feel about me being around more, being part of your family. Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking with the careful consideration she brought to big questions. Would you want to be my dad? She asked Daniel directly. I would be honored to be a father figure to you, Daniel said carefully. I can't replace your biological father, and I wouldn't try, but I would love to be someone you can count on, someone who shows up for school plays and helps with homework and listens when you need to talk. My real dad doesn't do any of those things, Emma said quietly. He left. Sarah's heart broke. They'd talked about Marcus's absence, but hearing Emma say it so plainly was still painful. That was his loss, Daniel said firmly, because you are an extraordinary kid, Emma. You're smart and kind and funny, and any parent would be lucky to be part of your life. Emma studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "Okay, you can be around more, but I get to call you Daniel, not Dad, not yet." "That's completely fair," Daniel agreed. Emma turned to her mother. "Are you happy, Mama?" Sarah pulled her daughter into her arms. "Yes, baby, I'm very happy." "Then okay." Emma hugged her back, then surprised Daniel by hugging him too. "But if you make my mom cry in a bad way, I'll be very upset with you." "I promise to do everything I can to only cause happy tears," Daniel said seriously. That evening, after Daniel had driven them home and left with gentle goodbyes, Emma got ready for bed with unusual quiet. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, tucking her in. "I was thinking about Grandma," Emma said. "She always said good things come to people who keep hoping. Do you think she sent Daniel to us?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I think Grandma would say that we never know how things will work out, but that love always finds a way. I love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweet girl, more than anything in this world." After Emma fell asleep, Sarah sat in the living room, looking around at their small apartment. So much had happened in this space, so many struggles, so many tears, so many moments of wondering if she could keep going, but also so much love, so much growth, so much proof that she was stronger than she'd ever known. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Thank you for giving me a chance, for giving us a chance. Sleep well." Sarah smiled, typing back, "Thank you for coming back, for not giving up on us." She looked at the mission trip information packet on the coffee table. She was leaving in 4 months. Daniel had arranged for Emma to stay with Rachel and had even offered to fly Rachel in from Denver, so Emma wouldn't have to travel. She thought about all the changes coming, the counseling sessions they'd start next week, the family dinners with Daniel's family, the slow process of building a blended life. It was terrifying. It was hopeful. It was real. That night, Sarah dreamed of her mother, sitting under the old tree in the backyard. In the dream, her mother smiled and said, "See, baby, I told you, today is always a gift." Sarah woke with tears on her cheeks and hope in her heart. The wedding was small, just family and close friends in the garden of Daniel's mother's home. Sarah wore a simple ivory dress, elegant but practical. Emma wore a matching flower girl dress and took her job very seriously, walking down the aisle, scattering rose petals with careful precision. Daniel's family had welcomed Sarah and Emma with open arms. His mother, Margaret Chen, was already planning grandmother activities with Emma, who had taken to calling her Grandma Margaret. As Sarah walked down the aisle, she caught sight of Rachel in the front row, crying happy tears. Next to her sat Janet from the hospital and several of Sarah's colleagues. On Daniel's side were his sister, his cousins, and a few close friends from college, people who remembered them together, who had watched their love story unfold the first time. But it was Emma who stood up front, who Daniel had insisted be part of the ceremony itself. Because this wasn't just about Sarah and Daniel getting married, it was about becoming a family. The officiant spoke about second chances, about love that endures time and circumstances, about the courage it takes to try again. When it came time for vows, Daniel spoke first. "Sarah, 12 years ago, I made a choice I thought I had to make. I thought duty and love were incompatible. I thought I couldn't have both the life I was expected to live and the life I wanted. I was wrong. You've taught me that real courage isn't choosing between love and responsibility. It's finding a way to honor both. You show me what strength looks like when it doesn't give up, when it keeps climbing even when the mountain seems insurmountable. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of your love, supporting your dreams, and building a life with you and Emma that honors everything you fought for." Sarah was crying before she even began her vows. "Daniel, you've taught me that it's okay to accept help, that accepting love doesn't make me weak, that sometimes the universe does give second chances, and it's okay to take them. You've shown Emma what it means to be someone she can count on, and you've shown me that partnership means building something together, not carrying everything alone. I promise to keep challenging you, supporting you, and reminding you who you are when the world tries to tell you different. I promise to build a life with you that makes room for both our dreams." Then Emma stepped forward, and the officiant handed her a small card with words she'd written herself. "I promise," Emma read carefully, "to let you be part of our family, to not be too grumpy when you tell me to do homework, to remember that you're trying, even when things are hard, and to teach you how to braid hair because Mama says you need to learn. The garden erupted in laughter and happy tears. After the ceremony, during the small reception, Sarah's phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something made her answer. "Sarah Mitchell?" a woman's voice said. "Yes, this is Karen from the Guatemala Medical Mission. I wanted to personally thank you for your work last summer. The families you helped are still talking about you. We were wondering if you'd be interested in leading a team next year." Sarah looked across the garden at Daniel, who was showing Emma how to dance, both of them laughing. She thought about the mission trip that had changed her life, the families she'd helped, the skills she'd used, the purpose she'd felt. "Yes," Sarah said. "I'd love to." Because now she had support, now she had partnership, now she had someone to help carry the load, which meant she could reach for dreams she'd thought were impossible. That night, as they prepared to leave for a brief honeymoon, just a weekend, because Emma had school, Daniel pulled Sarah aside. "I have one more gift," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a check made out to Memorial Hospital's Nursing Scholarship Fund, in Sarah's name, for an amount that made her gasp. "Daniel, you spent years helping others," he said. "This will help 5 nursing students each year complete their education without the debt you carried. It's not just a gift, it's your legacy." Sarah kissed him then. There in the garden under the stars, thinking about how far she'd come from that morning 3 years ago when she'd woken up alone and afraid, wondering how she'd keep climbing. She'd kept climbing, and somewhere along the way, she'd found that she didn't have to climb alone. Later, much later, when Emma was asleep in the guest room and Sarah and Daniel were finally alone, Sarah looked at her new husband, still strange to think that word, and said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For finding me, for not giving up, for loving Emma, for remembering that sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for." "We found each other," Daniel corrected, "and I think we were always going to. Some stories are just meant to have a second chapter." Sarah thought about her mother, about the grandmother Emma would never fully know, but who had shaped both their lives with her wisdom and love. Today is a gift, and Sarah had finally learned to unwrap it. Sarah's story reminds us that life doesn't always follow the path we expect. Sometimes it takes detours through heartbreak and struggle. Sometimes we have to learn to climb mountains alone before we can learn to climb them with others. But the message at the heart of Sarah's journey is this: it's okay to be tired. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to not have all the answers. What matters is that you keep showing up for the people you love, that you don't let hardship steal your capacity for hope, and that you remain open to the possibility that good things can still happen, even when you least expect them. True strength isn't carrying every burden alone. It's having the courage to accept help when it's offered. It's recognizing that second chances are real, that people can grow and change, and that sometimes the universe conspires to remind us that we are never truly alone. Faith, humanity, kindness, and perseverance. These are the qualities that transform ordinary struggles into extraordinary stories. These are the tools that help us survive the hard times and embrace the joy when it finally arrives. If Sarah's story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. Remember, today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. Make yours count.